Hello, my name is Nora O'Neill, and I'm the Regional Accountability Reporter at the Charlotte Observer. On behalf of our newsroom and the News and Observer in Raleigh, we want to welcome everyone to this event. Our McClatchy Media newsrooms have been reporting together on impacts from Helene's historic flooding, landslides, and damage since the storm hit our state's mountain counties and spots near Charlotte so hard on September 27th. With help from our panelists, we will focus on two vital topics tonight: challenges to getting people back into stable housing after 73,000 residences were damaged, and challenges to repairing thousands of damaged and destroyed roads and bridges. Those of you who have signed on, feel free to place questions in the chat field and we'll do our best to get them answered. For now, Richard, can you please introduce yourself and our panelists?
Sure, I'm Richard Stradling. I'm the transportation reporter for the News and Observer. Joining us this evening are Lance Mills, whose family's home was destroyed in Swannanoa by flooding; Nathan Ramsey, the executive director of Land of Sky Regional Council, which is a regional planning and development organization; Carol Pritchett, who's the mayor of Lake Lure, a town of about 1,400 residents in Rutherford County, where the Rocky Broad River flows into the lake; and Tim Anderson, the top engineer for North Carolina Department of Transportation's Division 13, which covers 7 of the hardest hit counties in the mountains. We're grateful to all of you that you could join us this evening. Thank you. We're going to start by focusing on housing, and those are topics that Lance and Nathan know intimately, but Carol and Tim can feel free to chime in with your experiences and observations if you'd like. So Nora, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, so let's start with Lance tonight. We've reported on how awful it was, but for those who don't know, what happened to your home and your family in Swannanoa when the flood struck?
Well, that morning was a lot more than we expected. We've seen lots of rain. I have seen the river high many times, enough to make me nervous, but I've never seen it come out of its bed. And it wasn't even light yet when we realized that there was so much water in the driveway that there was no way we could safely make it out. And we said, okay, well, let's just stay here. We'll shelter in place and we should be fine. Mm-hmm. Well, that didn't really turn out to be the case. The water came up the steps on the front porch and then was on the porch, and then it was in the house, and it broke the end of our house where we had French doors and windows that led to the breezeway that attached the house to the garage. And then we felt this movement and realized that the house was floating. Our neighbor's shed knocked our front porch away, and the porch over that roof collapsed while we were still moving. We kept floating backwards towards the river. Luckily, our oldest, Jonah, was determined enough that he broke through the drywall and got up in the attic, and with a hammer and a putty knife and a chef's knife to cut through the shingles, he made a hole in the roof big enough for us to go through, and we all got up on the roof and sat there while the house was still moving until it finally wedged up against some trees that were behind the house. And then we waited for 2 hours in the rain for the rescue boats to come.
Mm-hmm. It's such an unbelievable story, and we've been grateful to you and your wife Sabrina for speaking with us about what you've been through. You know, more than 6 months later since Hurricane Helene has hit, what does your current situation look like as far as housing goes?
Well, the house is clearly irreparable. We've gone through, or applied for many different programs. One of them is the hazard mitigation, and we haven't really heard anything from them. We were told when we signed up it might be 8 to 12 months before we even found out if we were eligible or what they would do. Right now we're looking at the private property debris removal program that will come and gather the rest of the debris, demolish the house and haul those materials away. Because we were the last stop in the river, there was a lot of debris, not just from our house and our belongings, but from all over the neighborhood. I mean, there were things from across US 70 that wound up in our yard. We have been incredibly blessed to have been shown the kindness by our local nonprofit that are absolute heroes, Be Loved Asheville. They have been on the ground since day one, doing everything they could do to help people, bring water, food, generators, warm clothes, propane and heaters. And they've been rebuilding homes. They've been providing tiny homes, campers to whoever they could. And they have offered to help us rebuild. And if we didn't have them on our side, I'm not sure if we would ever be able to live at our home again, but we will have a new house because of them.
Mm-hmm. One thing we've heard through our time reporting is that nonprofits and churches have really stepped up and helped so many people in Swannanoa and other hard-hit areas in Western North Carolina. But, there is an agency responsible for these types of disasters. And I know FEMA initially offered to place a temporary trailer on your property, but later told you it would be impossible since you live in a flood zone. How have these mixed messages from FEMA affected your recovery? And how has it shaped your perception of the government's role in disaster recovery?
Well, that's a great question. I feel like one of the hardest things about this whole experience is that sometimes information just isn't available, or you get conflicting messages. And, FEMA is designed to help with this kind of event. And I think my personal opinion is that it's understaffed, it's underfunded, and it's underprioritized, because as many people who are in desperate need, even still today, more than 6 months later, many of us have relied on the kindness of, nonprofits, charities. We relied on each other as neighbors to help each other out. We've been cared for by perfect strangers. There's been lots of people who have stepped up to try to help, and as wonderful as that is, it seems like a federal agency that is designed to manage emergencies would be able to do a better job of helping the people who have an immediate need, who have immediate and dire loss from their households, their livelihood, their basic safety. And it's frustrating that it's taken so much effort and so much communication that sometimes doesn't even come to fruition. I mean, I feel like we've asked certain questions, we've tried to get responses and didn't get them. It's been frustrating. We're right now, we got some rental assistance from FEMA and then went to reapply for it. And they finally responded 2 weeks later that said you didn't have all the right information. So I sent it back in, and they said, well, we have to do this other thing. And it's been weeks and I still don't know. Right now we're paying a mortgage on a place that we can't live, and we're paying rent, and the rent is more than our mortgage is. And it's a house. We were lucky to have been housed, but we don't have a home. This place isn't a home. It's a nice place to live, but we can't hang our own pictures on the wall. We can't, paint to a color that we like. It's hard having that center of your life, your safety and sanctuary, taken away in a day, and there's nothing really to replace it.
Mm-hmm. You're still paying mortgage for your home that was destroyed in Hurricane Helene, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Mm-hmm. And how much money has FEMA given you overall in terms of assistance?
It's hard to say. At the beginning, they gave us a pretty fair amount to help to deal with the immediate needs. One of the things that we applied for but were not eligible to get was transportation assistance. And I don't know how that is the case, because all of our vehicles were completely submerged and totaled, including my full-size truck that's taller than I am. Everything was underwater, and I don't know why we didn't qualify to get some help with transportation. Luckily we were, through the kindness of others, donated cars so that we could at least get to and from and take care of the things we needed to. And without that, we would have been lost. We didn't qualify for any moving and storage costs, even though, we had no place really to put what little we were able to salvage from the house. So some of those things have been pretty frustrating, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And with all the practical challenges that come with recovery, your family has had to cope with the emotional toll of losing your home. What has it been like to reckon with the scale of destruction caused by the storm, both at your home and in your community?
It has been very hard. I have to tell you, there's, even still driving through Swannanoa, they have made enormous strides and progress in getting things cleaned up. They've been working along the Swannanoa River and removing some of that debris, and they've restored bridges and fixed some roads. But there are still places that you drive by that they still look like a war zone or are reminiscent of the huge amount of destruction that took place. I feel like it was a collective trauma for our whole region, and everyone to some degree or another suffered and was hurt by this event. Some people, their house did fine and they lost power and water for a little while and they came out okay. And some people lost everything. Some people lost loved ones. And, we're fortunate that we didn't lose more, but it's been hard. I mean, to be honest, I'm still being treated for PTSD because it was enough that it has not gone away. It's maybe gotten better. You develop some personal resilience by being exposed to the consequences of this storm, but there's still sometimes that it just overwhelms you.
Mm-hmm. As someone who's really experienced this firsthand, and I'm sure many, many people who have had similar struggles to you. Looking ahead, what do you believe needs to change, if anything, in the way recovery is handled for people who, through no fault of their own, lose their homes to natural disasters?
Well, I think there's really probably many, many different things. I don't think there's a silver bullet that would fix everything. It needs to be more like silver buckshot. I know that, even just getting better information out, before the storm, we didn't know that we were under a mandatory evacuation until it was far too late. We need to do things like as we're building back and repairing things, building with the kind of climate resilience that would help us to endure another storm, because none of us expected this. None of us thought it was even possible. But now that we know it is, there's no reason for us to expect that it won't happen again. And we need to do what we can to make ourselves ready for that. We need to make our communities able to respond to that. I mean, I know like one of the things that was a very ironic tragedy is that in knowing that the storm was coming and that it might be very bad, a lot of the bottled water that was dispensed in order to get it to people who needed it after the storm was staged in Swannanoa, and the floodwaters carried a lot of it off. And, no one would have anticipated that would be the case, but we need to be ready. And again, it was very heartening to see the community come together. We came back the Monday after the storm to bring supplies, gas and gas cans and water and food and whatever else, and then came back on the following Friday. And in just the span from Monday to Friday, every flat space in Swannanoa had a pop-up tent and a table, and people were giving away clothes, hot food, water, baby clothes, baby formula, anything they could to help. And it was neighbor helping neighbor. And that was amazing. That was a huge community outreach. It was a huge step for us all to just reconnect, which is a huge part of us being able to recover and rebuild. But it really seems like it would be awesome if the powers that be, who are tasked with doing those things, took a larger role in providing the services and the goods that a community that's been utterly ravaged is going to need right away.
Mm-hmm. Lance, thank you so much for answering these questions. We're going to move over to Nathan, Nathan Ramsey for a few questions now. Nathan, there's been an ongoing debate about whether the federal and state government has done enough to support the victims of Hurricane Helene. FEMA has provided $425 million in individual assistance to more than 150,000 households. 6 months after Helene hit, what is the most encouraging progress that you see that's been made in getting residents into adequate temporary housing or back into their homes?
Thank you, Nora. The scale and magnitude of Helene was, I think, as Mr. Mills indicated, was beyond the scope of what I think any of us imagined. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge over 100 people in Western North Carolina lost their lives to Helene, and we can rebuild our communities, we can rebuild homes, but we can never bring them back. There were almost 20 people in my own neighborhood, own community who lost their lives, and people I've known for most of my life. So, I think it's important that we remember them and how what they contributed to our communities. But, we can't bring them back. Every day, things in Western North Carolina get better. And as Mr. Mills indicated, there's been philanthropic groups, churches, volunteer organizations from all over the country who have come here to help us. And we want to say thank you to the people in North Carolina, to the people across the country who have come to our rescue in our darkest hour, in our time of need. We can never say thank you enough, and you have been a godsend for us. Whenever you question the humanity and the goodness and kindness of people going through what we have gone through, gives you hope that you see how good people can be, how strangers are helping strangers. As Mr. Mills said, neighbors came in and helped their neighbor. It's been a wonderful thing. But our rebuilding is going to take a long time. We're looking at over $60 billion in damages. The scale is enormous. And although the federal government has appropriated additional funding, the state of North Carolina has appropriated around $1.5 billion. It's not enough. We are looking at about $25 billion in unmet needs right now. A lot of the federal funding has not come into our communities. And we have people who have a mortgage on a home and the home is no longer there. And they can't just go to a bank and get a loan. And unless they have some type of assistance, they're not going to be able to rebuild their home. So, as you mentioned, FEMA's provided about $1 billion in assistance to Western North Carolina. At one time, they were housing over 6,000 people in temporary housing. But a lot of the assistance so far has come because of the nonprofits and the private efforts. So, North Carolina is working on their CDBG-DR action plan. They've submitted that to the federal government. Hopefully that money will come soon. The city of Asheville has over $200 million that they've just approved, and we're waiting federal approval. But our recovery will take many years.
Mm-hmm. What do you see has fallen into the gap between aid that is available and people's actual needs?
Well, first, we don't, a lot of this money has not hit the communities yet. So we have local governments who are out millions of dollars in public assistance. They know they'll probably get FEMA reimbursement for that. But right now you have these small local governments that are looking at tens of millions of dollars in unmet needs, far beyond what their budgets can handle. The state provided about $100 million to zero interest loans, but there was actually over $600 million in demand for that. So our local governments need cash flow assistance. Our small businesses, although they can go get loans, and SBA does have lending ability to help them. Many of these businesses cannot go out and take on additional loans. So, they need some type of grant funds, grant opportunities to assist them. There's been a lot of private dollars there to help, but the need is enormous. I think there was over $200 million in request when Appalachian Community Capital came out with a grant program through Dogwood Health Trust and some funding the state of North Carolina had. And they were only able to commit about $50 million. And then housing, you've talked about housing earlier. Our ability to rebuild homes in our communities is really going to determine how successful we are in the recovery from Helene. We had a very tight housing market prior to this disaster. We had some of the most expensive housing market in the state of North Carolina was in the Asheville metro. And what Helene did is made all those challenges much more difficult. So I know we see what our friends down east have gone through and how long it's taken them to rebuild homes. We know, Governor Stein, the legislature are working really hard to make sure that we don't see those delays with our recovery from Helene. But, that remains to be seen. And we're just going to have to work together to try to push this faster. But federal money is slow and bureaucratic. And unfortunately, it takes some time.
Small rural mountain towns often face unique challenges during disaster recovery. Like you mentioned, some towns don't have enough money, they don't have big enough budget to upfront costs like debris removal and things like that. What other specific difficulties have these small mountain towns that are really hard hit by the storm encountered?
Absolutely. We have small communities that have been devastated. I know we have the mayor of Lake Lure here, but you think of the Hickory Nut Gorge, Lake Lure, Chimney Rock, Marshall, Hot Springs. You see Spruce Pine, other communities that are facing tens of millions, in reality, probably hundreds of millions of dollars to cost to rebuild those communities. It will cost more to rebuild those communities than the entire tax base in those communities. So unless they get state help, federal help, they can't rebuild their infrastructure. They can't come back. And although there's been a lot of money promised from the federal government, a lot of that money has not hit our communities. Also, we're facing capacity challenges. So in these small towns, small jurisdictions, they have a very small number of staff. Many of them struggle to manage federal dollars that are bureaucratic and have a lot of red tape. So I know our regional councils are working to try to support our local communities, but we need more resources to help them, be successful in their recovery. A lot of these challenges going forward are very complex. Disaster recovery experts have shared with me in many respects, the first year or two coming out of a disaster are more challenging because the issues you're trying to solve, rebuilding homes, keeping businesses, rebuilding your infrastructure are things you can't do overnight. So it's in some ways, it's more challenging than the first 30 or 60 days when we saw so much heroic action by our first responders, neighbors, our communities. It's really a miracle more people didn't die from Helene, but that's because our communities came together and we worked to help each other. But, we're looking at a long, hard road.
Mm-hmm. And, given the extensive damage we're talking about in areas like Swannanoa Valley, what is the realistic time frame for restoring permanent housing and rebuilding these communities, especially in the hardest hit regions?
Well, first, we need more federal money. We're looking at a $25 billion gap. And unless we get, which is almost the amount of the entire state budget. So unless we get more federal dollars in Western North Carolina, it won't be enough. And hopefully there'll be another disaster supplemental later this year. And I know our members of Congress, the North Carolina congressional delegation has been united working with our members of our General Assembly, Governor Stein. They worked with Governor Cooper to try to secure additional resources. So we can't rebuild. There's so many people who do not have the financial ability to come back without public assistance. What the private groups have done has been miraculous. And they have been here. They're still here. As Mr. Mills mentioned, Beloved Asheville is a great example of a nonprofit has done heroic things. We've had Catholic Charities, Baptist Men on a Mission, Samaritan's Purse, the Amish, the Mennonites, people that are coming in, donating their time, providing supplies, materials to rebuild homes at no cost to homeowners. So that's wonderful. The problem we're facing is the scale. You mentioned the number the tens of thousands of homes that have been damaged. Some of that damage wasn't extensive, but many of these homes were completely demolished or have significant damage, and there's not enough private money to do it alone.
Well, thank you so much for answering some of these questions today, Nathan. I'm going to hand things over to Richard now, who's going to talk a little bit about transportation.
Sure, thank you. And we've got a little technical difficulties, so I've got the headphones on. Tim, let me start with you. The DOT has said this is by far the biggest natural disaster that it has ever faced. And at one time, there were 1,454 roads closed. And even now, more than 6 months later, there's 137 that remain closed. Your region includes the city of Asheville, but also the highest peaks in the Blue Ridge Mountains and some very rural and rugged terrain. I wonder if you could describe what you and your coworkers saw that first day after the storm on September 27th. Tim, I'm not hearing you.
Hey, it's better if I unmute, isn't it?
Okay, all right, excellent. Start from the top.
So, in my 24 years with the DOT, I've seen a lot of hurricanes. We had two, Hurricane Ivan, Hurricane Francis, Tropical Storm Fred more recently, and I guess in terms of scale for the DOT, our biggest storm so far before Helene was Hurricane Florence, and about a $250 million total repair. The estimate for this storm is just a little bit under $5 billion in infrastructure damage. $3 billion of that's in Division 13. With the escarpment, we caught, we had the Hickory Nut Gorge down through Chimney Rock, all the way up through Buncombe County and McDowell County, especially too, and then Mitchell and Yancey. So we got hit really hard, and our folks, you put together all of our experience, nobody had seen anything like it, and we didn't have a chance to talk about it very long because we lost all of our communications. So fortunately, we have DOT staff. We have a maintenance yard, and pretty much, in every one of my counties, there's a maintenance yard, and folks went to work. But it's definitely a size and scope that we're not accustomed to at all.
Yeah. Describe what some of the roads look like, and were there just places where you just couldn't get?
Yeah, that's we typically have a priority when storms happen, and we reestablish the interstates, the major primaries first, because those big arteries are how you get relief supplies in, materials in, and then our secondary system. But with this one, there was so much damage, while we were doing that. And fortunately, I got to say, from this, before the storm even started, we had many contracts ready, cut and shove contracts to help open roads. First responders were out cutting trees. Private citizens were cutting trees. Contractors just started working on places that were damaged when the water went down before we could even get to them in some cases. And, so we pre-position all that. The storm happens. We go through a lot of our normal things because, we had to get I-40 back open at Old Fort Mountain so that we could get supplies into Asheville and folks could get out of Asheville to go buy supplies. But at the same time, there were life safety issues where we needed to put in pipes so that folks could get emergency services across rivers. You don't typically pipe a river, but in some cases we had to do that until we could do come back and perform a higher level repair, even though that's itself still a temporary repair. That case in point, the primary road on one side of that picture and the secondary road on the other side, they were completely gone in places. So just to establish one lane meant a lot. Our goal was to establish two, and then work on permanent, a more permanent temporary type crossing until we could get our bridges replaced with that permanent structure.
You had told me before that one of the early strategies was to get to every community. Talk to me a little bit about that. What the challenge was there, because you had some places, lots of places that were basically cut off from the outside world. Is that right?
That's correct. We had several areas were throughout my division and Division 14 to the west of me, and Division 11 to the northeast. The making sure that folks, if they can get to the state road, can get to the supplies they need, to the doctor, back to work, kids back in school. That was our initial goal, is get everybody back to where if they can make it to the state maintained highway, then they can move around and be reconnected to the community. In the mountain areas, that still means there's a lot of work to be done, because we work on the state maintained system, which includes interstates, primaries, and secondary roads. But we had primary roads that we had lost, so we had to reconnect those, and then secondary roads that were lost. And our goal was to have everybody, if they could get to that state maintained road, the state maintained road was repaired to at least a good temporary repair by Christmas, and we were able to do that earlier. So for us, that was a one challenge met, because that helps folks get reconnected. The second challenge is to get that to be a 2-lane road, so that folks can get in and out to start with recovery.
Right. So where do things stand now? You mentioned that there's an estimate of $5 billion or so in repairs, and I think maybe only $500 million has been actually spent. I mean, so there's a lot of work ahead. What kind of work remains to be done?
Yeah, so it runs the gamut. We've got a tremendous amount of small repairs done, medium-sized repairs on hundreds of thousands of dollar type repairs. We've got most of our major repairs under contract. What we have left, we have a plan to have under contract as quickly as possible. The big basins like the Cane River, the Toad River, the Nolichucky, the Rocky Broad, those projects are under what's called a progressive design build contracts. We have 5 of those contracts, so that designers and contractors can get started on a set of plans, and then we review those, and as sections of it are approved for work, they can go to work. And instead of the traditional design bid build process, in our region, in the 3 divisions, right now there's 151 bridges that need to be replaced. My division, the number sits at 71. And in a normal year, we would replace 7 to 8 bridges with our bridge program. So to give you a kind of a picture of the scope, and then you look at I-40 out in Division 14, the estimate on it's nearly $1 billion for the permanent repair. So it's a daunting process.
What do you and your contractors need to get this work done, and how long do you think it will take?
Yeah, so our contract community, DOT rallies, like when these things happen, we had folks coming in from other parts of the state. We still have folks coming in from other parts of the state. Our central units were on standby for anything we need, and they've met and exceeded every goal we had for, turning things around for us. Our contract community showed up in mass. I mean, we had contractors from North Carolina all the way down, all the way to Sand Hills area coming this way to help work. Contractors out of other states, and Tennessee got hit. South Carolina took a pretty good hit. Part of Georgia took a hit. We still had those contractors coming in. So we were very fortunate with that at the initial stages. We had employees from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet in for all the way through till Thanksgiving, and Florida DOT brought up temporary bridges and the crew and the design crews to help with that. And then they had to leave to go back for Milton, but they left the bridges, and we were able to put those in place. The biggest thing we need, we have a lot of bandwidth with our contract community. They're going to be very busy. There's going to be a lot of trucks on the road, just like there were all through the fall. And that's going to continue for several years in our region just to get it rebuilt. And one of the things we definitely need is patience. And I know that's hard for folks when they've lost everything and they're trying to rebuild. The other thing we need is folks to to understand that this is a long-term recovery, even for the highway system. And to make sure that, we've had a tremendous amount of help from the federal, our federal partners at FEMA and FHWA that do the highway type work. They are moving at a pace that's different than what we would normally see in a storm. Is a lot quicker. And that's been very beneficial for the department so that we can start pulling the infrastructure back together for the community so that they can start the rebuild. Continued support on that end, and our legislative partners, the same as Nathan mentioned, our legislative delegation in DC has been on the ground from day one. Our state level representatives and the governor, Governor Cooper was here a lot when it first happened. Governor Stein's been here. They are in it to see it all the way through. So as long as we can keep that momentum, then we should be able to keep moving forward. And a lot of our projects will be done, our major infrastructure type projects, bridges, things like that. There's not going to be like a magic day when we're all done. There'll be 18 to 24 months. Many of those bridges will be rebuilt because we've got multiple contractors working on them. Some of the larger bridges may take a little longer. The corridor projects, depending on the amount of work that needs to be done, is probably in the 2.5 year range.
Let me ask one more question before I bring Carol in. What is NCDOT doing to try and make these roads less vulnerable to flooding in the future? And how much of that is possible in a terrain where you've got not a lot of space, narrow valleys, mountain valleys?
Yeah, so it's from an engineering standpoint, it's an interesting dilemma. If you move the road, you have to buy property, which slows down the process. Also impacts citizens who've already been impacted by the storm. If you build it back in place, what does that look like? And one of the things that we're looking at, I've heard it said we need to build it so this could never happen again. And the reality is, in a storm this size, we can't build it so that nothing would be damaged. That's physically impossible in a lot of places, especially those narrow areas. You'd have to raise the road so high that it wouldn't be helping the properties that need to be able to access it. So what we are doing, we're using better data for our hydraulic designs. We're using more current data that recognizes that we have more intense events. 100-year storm now, when we call it 100-year design storm now, is way more intense than a 100-year design storm from 30 years ago. So we use that data, and then we look at what can we do in the places where we know the road's vulnerable to make it less vulnerable and more resilient. We may in a big storm still lose a lane, but if we can design it so that we keep one good lane, folks can still get in and out. Emergency services can get into folks. So our goal is to build it back similar, because most of them will have to go back into places they were, but build them back in a way that they can sustain these greater intensity rain events.
All right, good. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Carol, let me bring you in here. You have lived in Lake Lure since 2011, and you've been the mayor since 2019.
I have.
Describe the town for people who don't know it.
Well, Lake Lure is a town of about 1,400 people. It is, probably the central one in the town is, of course, is the lake, named also Lake Lure, and really sort of the heart of the community. It is a community that is, the economy is built on tourism, and not so much with respect to stores that sell merchandise, but really the economy here is built on people enjoying the beauty here, using the lake, the mountains, the trails, things like that. So it's very tight-knit group of people. When I first moved here, there were many more people who lived here, had just maybe summer homes. Since then, really the number of people who are here permanently has increased. We certainly saw, as an example, during COVID, when everyone else was so concerned because people were leaving the communities, out of fear, of course, of COVID. And we had so many more people who actually came to Lake Lure because it is a safe place. It is a secure place. It is rather insulated in some respects, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. It certainly was good for that, but it is a very beautiful part of North Carolina, and I think that really sort of one of the main places that attracts people here as far as tourism is concerned.
Yeah. So, and I imagine tourism, you depend on people being able to get in and out of there. What did the roads in and out of Lake Lure look like after the storm?
Well, immediately after the storm, so Memorial Bridge, we have one main artery through town, and that is Memorial Highway, or Highway 64. That is the only main artery, and it goes, through to Chimney Rock, or did. And so that was the path, if you will, to Hendersonville or Asheville, or going north. So, right after the storm, of course, there was so much debris in the roads, and on the Memorial Bridge, there was 20 feet high debris piled on top of the Memorial Bridge. So that was absolutely impassable at that point. And of course, as I said, that cuts off being able to go anywhere. So that is one of the flaws in having one road. Also, one of the things that's probably probably more pertinent here in Lake Lure than other places is there's so many private roads that connect people to be able to get to that highway. And that's probably more unusual in other cities that are a little bit more cosmopolitan, but a real problem here. We had so many people who were cut off from being able to get any help or being able to get out. So very fortunate that there were allowances now, but where people are going to be able to receive funding to improve private roads so that they have access to get to work, to get emergency care, to get supplies and things like that. So the roads, it was immediately, we were very lucky to be able to use local contractors to help us in the first couple of weeks to clear that debris away from the bridge, at least for one lane, so that people were able to pass on it. The road in Lake Lure itself, and as you know, Lake Lure really and Chimney Rock are right next to each other. The road really was not severely damaged, Highway 64, as it came through Lake Lure. Now, after you got into Chimney Rock, of course, then the roads and bridges there were destroyed. And so that actually cuts off access to going north that way. And that's a huge, very important, both for people being able to have access to get supplies, to get help that they need, services. But also, that's probably one of the key things that allows tourists to come from the north, from Asheville down to Lake Lure. So that's been a great problem. And DOT has been wonderful in working on that, and has been wonderful from the very beginning, to be honest with you. We're so fortunate we're in Division 13 and have always had such great partnerships with them. And certainly efforts are being made right now, and a temporary road has been constructed through Chimney Rock. That's not going to be open, though. When I say temporary road, it's a very rudimentary road and certainly has some limitations, but certainly emergency vehicles can get in and out. We do see, obviously there are, as Tim said, there are a tremendous number of huge trucks constantly driving on the road on 64 through there, and we see the wear and tear on that highway, and we certainly know that DOT is going to be repairing that as they can. But this is going to be a long process. I actually am from Texas, so I've lived in hurricanes all of my life. It is a long recovery, and there are things that people do need to be patient about and need to be understanding about. We are very fortunate in Lake Lure. We had no loss of life here, and most of our individual residences were not affected because they're built higher up on the side of the banks of the lake, and so that was very fortunate for us. But the main problems that we face here are huge infrastructure problems. Our wastewater treatment plant was destroyed. Our subaqueous collection system has been severely damaged. Our dam was definitely impaired. And then, of course, all of Chimney Rock came down the Broad River into Lake Lure. So much of the surface debris has already been removed. The Army Corps came about three weeks after the storm and began removing the surface debris. And I think just the surface debris was over a million cubic yards of debris. They've now begun working on removing the subsurface debris and the sediment. So that's a process that will take a long time. But we are so fortunate that we have begun on it, and certainly a sense of hope to everyone living here in Lake Lure as they look forward. As someone mentioned, it is very difficult in very small communities because most of the businesses are small business owners, and they really don't have the capital to wait out long stretches of time before they can begin to have revenue again. They just don't have that much capital. So, and the same thing with the town. We have a budget of $9 million for Lake Lure for our annual budget. In the first 3 weeks, we spent $1.6 million of our own money to have the debris cleared off the roads. So we have not yet, and each individual FEMA person has been wonderful and lovely to work with, and certainly very concerned. But, like almost all the other communities, we have yet to see any of the money. And the problem is for small municipalities with budgets and the amount of the enormity of the cost to fix the infrastructure, we're probably looking at $380 million. It's very difficult just to be able to have operating expenses moving forward.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned private roads and bridges. That's something you see throughout the region. And, a lot of the houses are connected to the main roads by little bridges over creeks and so forth, and that's something that that falls to a lot of those homeowners to try and repair. But Tim, I wonder if you wanted to comment on what DOT can do to help, or if at all, in that area.
Yeah, so the private roads and bridges, NCDOT, we're a public agency. We maintain the public roads. North Carolina is a little bit unique. We're one of 7 states that we maintain the interstates, primaries, and secondary roads, which is more of the, that last stretch to the house to home, down to subdivision streets. But there are a tremendous number of private bridges washed out. When you go at 19W. There were state bridges washed out. There's also private bridges. And so there is a program that's been pulled up from the ground up with the Department of Public Safety through emergency management. And with that program, there's $100 million that's been set aside to work to help restore private roads and bridges. And there's actually a website that folks can go to apply to let emergency management know, hey, I've got a road issue or a bridge issue, and that's ncdps.gov/Helene/PRB, and I'll be glad to send that to you so that you can put it out, or I'll put it in the chat if you want me to. But that's a resource that's relatively new. It would during Tropical Storm Fred was the first time that I recall seeing that. with this storm, given the magnitude of loss when it comes to private roads and bridges and the cost of some of these repairs, this program has been initiated.
Right. I think I saw somewhere an estimate of 8,000 private roads and bridges that were destroyed or damaged badly. Carol, how's access to Lake Lure now, and are you in a position to welcome visitors back again?
Well, we absolutely are. The lake itself right now is not open for use. As I said, the Army Corps has been scoped by FEMA to begin removing the subsurface debris and the sedimentation. And for safety reasons, we really can't allow anyone to use the lake because, as I said, we just don't know what is under there. But other than that, really everything else in Lake Lure is open. And so you certainly can access Lake Lure coming up from the south. It is past Chimney Rock, really that is really not open to the public. And Tim, correct me if I don't say this correctly, because there's been a little bit of confusion about it. But the road that is there now is it is certainly drivable, but it is not really designed for the public to be using to come in and out. And but certainly safety vehicles and contractors, et cetera, can come in that way. But we certainly have access to Lake Lure for everyone to come in. All of the hotels are open. The restaurants are open. A number of our trails are open. We did have a number of landslides, but we've managed to repair a lot of those. As I said, the main highway is completely open through Memorial Bridge. So we welcome anyone here, with the caveat we want everyone to understand we would never want to market something that wasn't safe. Probably the way we project it now, according to the Army Corps, it will be probably at least until the end of August before the lake, they've completed removing the sediment and debris there. But other than that, Rumbling Ball is open, which is on the lake and has 2 beautiful 18-hole golf courses and many other amenities there. So yes, we absolutely are open, and we really are very hopeful that people will come and take advantage of it. You do have to make a detour. If you want to get to Asheville, then you need to go to Hendersonville first and then to Asheville. But people are willing to do that, so we have people coming in. So we're very fortunate in that respect.
Nora, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So we have one question submitted by Bill Green of Black Mountain. He said, my home was totally destroyed by Helene. My premier property insurer paid nothing. When will a politician of either party address badly needed insurance reform? Insurers have paid nothing to victims of Helene. Their contracts protect the insurer and not the homeowner. If any of our panelists would like to take this question, feel free.
Well, I think that's been a problem for everywhere. Most people did not have flood insurance, and probably had no expectation that they needed it. I speak for Lake Lure just because of the topography here. So, as I said, we are very fortunate in that most people's homes were not totally destroyed. There was a lot of destruction to them from the water and the silt. But most of the people have found, I think, that their insurance is not covering it because they don't have flood insurance.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big challenges of this disaster is private insurance isn't much of a solution to help mitigate the harm, because most, as Mayor indicated, most people didn't have flood insurance, and that was because most people didn't ever think their property could flood. We have small creeks and all over Western North Carolina, and those little creeks turned into rivers and, became larger than anything we could have ever imagined. Also, landslides were excluded from policy coverage, and we had over 2,000 landslides, which resulted in a lot of deaths, a lot of destroyed homes. There is an effort to provide legal services to individuals who need assistance. So, you can go to landofsky.org reach out to me directly, and we will try to get you in touch with the correct individuals. There is efforts for private attorneys who are volunteering to provide services, but we're trying to secure additional funding so people can access more legal assistance as they begin the process to rebuild.
You know, I think another problem that complicates that in
Thank
a lot of
you,
these small.
Nathan and Mayor for.
Mhm.
Okay, sorry. Well, thank you both for answering that question for us, and thank you to all our panelists for joining us this evening, and to everyone else who tuned in. Both of our newsrooms intend to stay on this important story, which we expect will continue to unfold for years. If anyone here, anyone listening, has any ideas about what we should be reporting on, we're all ears. You can share your ideas with us via email. I'm noneal@charlotteobserver.com or richardstradling@newsobserver.com. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. We really appreciate it.